Hello, my name is Stephen Cretney, and I'm with the West Kootenay Climate Hub. The Climate Hub facilitates connections and collaborations in the interest of accelerating climate action in our region. Hosting these monthly webinars is just one of the things that us volunteers do. Today's topic is preparing for wildfires. BC is no stranger to wildfires, and we know that in the West Kootenays, heat, smoke, and fires are a huge summertime concern. These are all severe consequences of climate change, which is caused mainly by the burning of fossil fuels, oil, gas, and coal. To help us better prepare for fire season, today's webinar will include Jon Jackson, Chris Bullock, Stephan Martineau, and Garrett Fishlock. We'll also have some question and answer time at the end, and we will be following up with a bunch of resources. It is a packed agenda, so I will be enforcing some strict time limits and sorry in advance if I have to cut off anyone's presentation. So to begin, we'll start with Jon Jackson. Jon is an emergency program coordinator with the Regional District of Central Kootenay. He has worked in emergency management for around 10 years, including managing the RDCK Emergency Support Services Program and developing and leading the Neighbourhood Emergency Preparedness Program. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my slides here. You should be able to see my screen now.
Yes.
Perfect. The technology works. Okay, thank you for inviting me to present to you today. As Stephen just said, I'm here to talk about emergency preparedness. And how we can all be more prepared for when emergencies happen. So I know the theme of today is really about wildfire, but what I'm going to talk about in terms of emergency preparedness could be applied to any kind of emergency. So just bear that in mind. This isn't just wildfire. This could be any sort of emergency, and how we can all collectively be more prepared for when those things happen. So this is what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to talk about the emergency management cycle and where emergency preparedness fits into what we term as a cycle of emergency management. Then I'll go into more detail about emergency preparedness, and then talk about a couple of the programs that the RDCK and most local authorities actually, we have similar approaches. So I'll talk about personal and family preparedness, which will be things you can do for yourselves and your immediate family. And then I'm going to talk a bit about the Neighbourhood Emergency Preparedness Program, which is something that the RDCK has developed and offers around our region. But again, similarly, other regional districts and local authorities have similar programs. And you don't have to be part of the RDCK or live in the RDCK to access our resources. So the last slide I've got here, I actually show the links, but Laura and Stephen are going to share those later on when the recordings get sent out. So everyone should have access to all of the links, which is great because you don't need to write them down when I flash up the slide in a few minutes. So before we get on to that, a little bit about me. So as Stephen said there, I work for the Regional District of Central Kootenay, and I'm going to call that the RDCK from now on because that's a bit easier to say. I've been with the RDCK now for about 4 years, or just over 4 years. Before that, I worked for the Canadian Red Cross as an operations manager. I've collectively worked in emergency management for about 10 years, before which I was a project manager and I worked on mega construction projects all around the world. The RDCK is a vast and diverse regional district. We serve approximately 65,000 people in an area which is the size of a small country. So it's very diverse. We have small towns, we have small villages, we have really rural communities. We have areas which are at the end of a road where it's basically one way in, one way out. We have communities which are reliant on ferries for access. All the communities and wherever the people live, because it's so diverse, the planning and so on that goes into making sure they're prepared and ready for when emergencies happen, each one's going to be very unique. And that's what I'll what we take into account when we talk about emergency preparedness, is understanding that uniqueness for each one of our communities. So that 65,000 people, the size of a small country, that's divided up into 11 different rural areas, as we term them, each of which has its own elected director. And then we've got 9 municipalities within that region. And collectively, we deliver a whole bunch of services. I think it's over 200 different services, from water to land use planning, recreation, waste management, and of course, emergency services. And amongst just a few of the services that we provide. Our emergency management program, we encompass all 4 phases of what I call the emergency management continuum, which takes me to this next slide. So the emergency cycle. This is a fairly typical way of understanding emergency management, and I just wanted to share it with you because it explains where emergency preparedness fits into the whole part of managing emergencies. So we talk about it being a cycle because it's a continuous process that flows from one phase to the next, and it's continuous. So there are 4 phases: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery, as you can see there from those arrows. And really today we're focusing about emergency preparedness, what it is, why we need to do it, and what we all collectively need to do in order to be prepared for when emergencies happen. But it's perhaps important just to touch on what the other 3 phases are. So mitigation is a collective term for all the actions that can be done to reduce the likelihood or severity of incidents happening. So try to reduce the frequency, try to stop them from happening will be the perfect goal. And if they do happen, to try to reduce the severity of them. So a great example of emergency mitigation is the Fire Smart program. You're going to hear some presentation about that later on today. I'll skip over preparedness because we're going to go into a bit more detail about that. Response phase, these are the actions that are taken during an incident. So the incident has happened, it is happening currently, and this is the actions that are taken to protect lives, reduce the impacts, protect infrastructure, and so on. So think firefighting. That would be a great example of a response activity. And then the last step in that continuum is recovery. And these are the actions that happen after the incident or during the incident, but continue after the incident has passed. So the fire has been reduced to a safe stage. We can start getting back to some kind of normal life again. So it's the actions that are needed to be taken to get back to that normal routine again. And it might not be normal as it was before the incident. It might be what some people call a new normal, but it's a sustainable state. So life can continue. We're no longer in that response phase. All right. So this next slide is actually a kind of a timeline of a particular incident. The lightning flashing there is when the incident actually happens. So up until that point, we're doing the preparedness work, we're doing the mitigation work, and then you'll see an incident happens. So for the purposes of today, That could be a wildfire that breaks out that threatens a particular community. And so then you've got that big red, whatever you call it, shape there. A significant amount of effort goes into the response, and then there's recovery work that continues after the response activities. And that recovery period can be months or years, depending on the extent of the emergency. Think about a community that's been completely destroyed or very heavily damaged by a wildfire. There's a lot of work that's needed to do to rebuild things, to get people's homes back, to reestablish that infrastructure, and it takes a long time. Okay, so emergency preparedness and where does that all fit in then? So, emergency preparedness, these are the things we can do at any time, like now, before an incident actually occurs. And it reduces the impact of an incident when it happens. So, what it helps us to do is to prevent an emergency from becoming a disaster. So, think about an emergency is a wildfire, sure, but that's not going to affect anything unless we're not prepared for it. So this is a way that we can be prepared and we can avoid becoming overwhelmed by this emergency when it happens. So in a lot of cases, the um the first responders and the advice to the residents in the face of a wildfire is going to be, let's move you out of the way, that let's evacuate you to a safe place while we deal with this fire. And so by being prepared for that evacuation, we can actually become more resilient. We can reduce the stress on ourselves and our families because we know what we need to do in order to evacuate safely and effectively. We've got all the things we need prepared, ready to go. And then when the incident is past and we can go home, it helps us get back to normal life much more quickly. So that's why the emergency preparedness is so important.
I am just going to jump in here and say you've got like about a minute to wrap up, John.
Gosh, okay, I'll have to talk very quickly. Thank you, Stephen. So two programs that we have which help us be more prepared. The first one is personal and family emergency preparedness. And so this is knowing the risks that could affect you, having a kit and having a plan. So there's a lot of resources on our website, and Stephen and Laura will share those links. Things to remember in your kit are, I don't recommend an off-the-shelf kit. They're too generic and they will not have what you need. It's best to build your own. We've got a checklist on the website which gives you some ideas. Important things to think about will be stuff like your medications. If you've got pets, pet supplies, food, bowls for the water and the food. Things like, do you wear glasses? Do you have any medical devices? Make sure you've got all of that stuff. They can become a challenge very quickly, and you may not have access to them if you get evacuated. And then remember to take any important documents with you, like insurance. And then I want to talk about the Neighbourhood Emergency Preparedness Program. So this is expanding on those ideas of your individual and family preparedness. This is where neighbors help neighbors. So you work together with people around you, could be people in your street, could be people in your local area, people within your community. And it helps to build neighborhood resilience. So it's understanding, again, a similar approach. What are the hazards? How could it affect you? But then what are the vulnerabilities within your community? And a way to think about this, an example I often use, anyone that's heard me talk about this before, you've probably heard me use this example, but Mr. Jackson, so me, if I lived in your area and I don't drive anymore, so I don't have access to a vehicle, if we need to evacuate, how would I evacuate? And this could be something that you would say, well, I've always got a spare seat in my vehicle. If there is an evacuation, I'll swing by, I'll pick you up, and I'll take you to wherever we need to go, to be safe in the face of that evacuation. And so that will be, we've determined there's a hazard. We've determined there's a vulnerability, the fact that I don't drive. We've determined that there's an asset, which is that you have a vehicle with a spare seat, and we've developed a plan. So that's an example of all of those components coming together to build a plan for what we can do. Every community, every neighborhood is going to be different. You're going to have different assets. You're going to have different hazards. You're going to have different vulnerabilities. But coming together and making that plan is the key essential part of it. And again, on our website, and we'll share links, there's a lot more information about this. There are some tools on there to help build a team to actually do this planning work. And we're going to be sharing some templates for plans, which you can really just go through and fill in the blanks to build your own plan. It's a great way to work together with your neighbors, and everyone, I think, wins. You'll come out stronger after building the plan.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jon. And sorry to have cut you off and made you rush there, but
That's all
c'est
good.
la
I think
vie.
I covered the main salient topics there, Stephen.
Perfect.
Thank you. And again, just the links will be shared, and there's a lot more information on there. So please go and have a look at them.
Yeah, and Laura has already put links in the chat, so you can go and check those right now, but we will be in the follow-up email also doing it. Well, thank you again, Jon. That is great.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
You can stop sharing your screen now, and we'll call up. Who's next on this list of mine?
Chris, I
Looks
think.
like Chris. Hello, Chris.
Hello, everyone.
Chris Bullock is an environmental engineer involved in a number of community initiatives to accelerate the transition to mitigation and adapt to climate change. Today, he will be sharing about a DIY air filter system that the East Kootenay Climate Hub started promoting last year. So you
Right
have the
on.
floor, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Just trying to see how I do the slideshow. Yeah. Oh, okay. Hopefully it doesn't keep cycling, but yeah, thank you, everyone. I just want to give some thoughts of some things we can do individually to prepare for what's becoming a wildfire season, unfortunately, when the sky turns a bit apocalyptic, and we all suffer from poor air quality. And we've come up with we've been promoting this idea of these DIY filter fans that are fairly inexpensive to build, and that people can do individually to help improve their air quality inside their house. But also, I'm going to talk a bit about some ideas of community building and some of the things we've been doing as a group to try and promote these in the community. So yeah, I'm going to just talk a little bit about the harms of breathing wildfire smoke, and then these Corsi Rosenthal fans, or we call them the DIY filter fans. And then I've come up with a few ideas to throw out there to see if there's a interest in the West Kootenays to try and promote them over there, and some of the things we've learned from doing it over here. So in this slide, I'm just showing, when there's a wildfire, there's a lot of particles that get emitted into the atmosphere. A lot of them are very, very small. We call them PM 2.5, and that means they can transfer into your bloodstream through your lungs, and those can cause some significant health effects. Also, usually when the same environment causes heat stress, so there's a big part of our population that can be quite vulnerable to these effects, and it's hard to get away from and avoid it. So looking for some solutions to try and remove those particles from the air during those times, which can be fairly extended in recent years, is something that's a pretty good thing to do, just to be prepared and to be ready to go and adapt to this new environment that we're in. So I'm going to be talking about these like sort of Corsi Rosenthal boxes. There's two professors in the States called Corsi and Rosenthal that came up with these, I think, during the pandemic as a way of filtering out airborne viral particles. And they're a very effective and very cost-effective way of doing that. Basically, you're using a box fan, a bunch of high performance filters, and some cardboard shrouds to make sure you get the maximum airflow through them. And they're very, very effective at taking out very small particles. So they're one of these units can actually turn over the air inside your house about 6 times an hour. So you get a large degree of treatment happening with when these fans running inside your house. And actually during the pandemic, they were trying to promote getting these into school classrooms as a way of reducing viral plagues being transmitted around within the classroom. They're very, they don't use very much energy, 70 to 90 watts. So similar to an old school light bulb. And you can build a 2 filter version, which is like a triangle, or you can do the 4 filter version. And it's around $120 to $160 to build one of these units. And they do a lot more air cleaning than those more expensive air filters that you can buy, which are in the $200 to $400 range. And you barely turn over a room once an hour, basically. And the filters are quite expensive to replace. I think in the order of $200 a piece to change them out. So I'm just going to show the main components. So the main thing is one of these inexpensive box fans that can move a lot of air. These filters are generally the same size as the box fan, so 20 inch by 20 inch. And you can buy these on Amazon, and there is a discount if you can buy them in bulk. Like they can come in cases of 12. So you team up with other people, you can get basically enough for 3 units in a big box of filters. And one of the main components that really improves the effectiveness is to add this cardboard shroud, because what happens is as this thing's blowing air up and out of this box, you end up with quite a vacuum, which is what draws the air through the filters. But you'll also get a lot of air running around the corners of the fan back into the box, so you're just circulating the same air in and around. So the shroud actually makes a big difference in how well these things perform. And basically you just duct tape, assemble it all with duct tape, and it can look pretty crude, or you can dress it up a little bit with some poster board or other things to make it look a little less something you'd rather have in your house. There are little wheels and stuff you can buy on internet, on Google, that can make them roll around easier within your room. So just things like that we can talk a bit about. So we started this in the East Kootenays partly because we were manning some public booths, and it was really boring sitting in front of a table with just a bunch of paper sitting on top of it. So it's a way of we thought these are kind of a fun way to engage with the public. So we had a demo unit put up there, and people could come and talk to us about it, which was a good way to engage with people.
Hey, Chris, I'm just going to jump in here and tell you to wrap it up.
Okay. So anyway, I just thought I'd throw some ideas out there in case, as a group over in the West Kootenays, you wanted to look at ideas of how to promote this idea further within the community. We did do a bulk order, and it wasn't super successful. I don't think a lot of people knew who we were and were reluctant to maybe pass on the money, and it was a bit of work organizing it. But anyway, we've learned a bunch of things about that. So if anyone has more questions about that, we've taken them to renovation fairs. We've had home hardware suggest they might even have one on display and assemble them, and because a lot of these pieces they could have on hand. So that's a way of getting them out into the community. So anyway, and there are a number of initiatives to get them out in maker space programs or within schools, but it does take a bit of upfront cash to come up with all the bits and pieces to make that happen. So So anyway, that's basically, I just want to introduce the idea to you and see if anyone can build them themselves, but it's also a fun thing to do with a number of other people as a way of building community. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Chris. We happen to have one of those expensive filters that we bought during a couple of summers ago, and you're right, they are expensive, and the filters that we have to buy are also expensive. Where, well, these are obviously easy to do and relatively easy to do, and it seems like a good project I could put my kids on over the summer to make and give out to some of our neighbors.
Right
so,
on.
thank you. Stephan Martineau is the manager and founding director of the Slocan Integral Forest Cooperative in Winlaw. It's a nonprofit community forest cooperative. And he also is an integral consultant, helping groups to seek and implement practices that are effective and resilient to change. So he is our next speaker. Welcome, Stephan, sorry.
Thanks, Stephen. Very cool, Chris. I really like your little fan system there. I'm gonna have to try it at home here. We also bought a few of the expensive ones, but it's always nice to have something that the community can do and use. So I really like the idea. Thanks so much. So I'm a manager of SIFCo. SIFCo is a community forest in the Slocan Valley. And I'm just starting my timer here. SIFCo is a community forest in the Slocan Valley. We've been, managing the east side of the valley for about 16, 17 years now. And when we started, our main focus was really we foresaw what was coming in a way. We saw that wildfire mitigation and, climate change adaptation was primordial to our planning strategies. So we began at the very start. First year in action was our main focus was like, how do we begin to adapt our forest ecosystem to withstand wildfires when they come. And in 2014, I think we're the first tenure holder in BC to release a landscape level wildfire strategic plan for our tenure. And since then, we've been working at that plan. We've now, what we call interfaced about 3,000 acres of our land base. And in 2021, there was the wildfire that started in the Troza watershed, and that wildfire became one of the biggest wildfire in BC that summer. And there was 174 homes that were evacuated during that wildfire. And because it was in our tenure and we had worked a lot with BC Wildfire Services over the years in our wildfire mitigation strategies, we were really involved in, dealing with the Troza wildfire. So some of our employees were laying lines, some of our contractors were working on the fire. I was meeting quite regularly with these incident commanders and looking at where the fire was going, what was the challenges. And what happened during that summer as we had these 174 homes being evacuated was that we realized quickly that we were not prepared for dealing with that event. We started to look at, where can, people were evacuated. So where can they go? What can we do about it? We started working with the local halls, trying to find a place for them to come. Columbia Wireless shut down their internet services because they were afraid that their towers would go up in flames. Suddenly we had no communication in the local community because we don't have cell reception in the Slocan Valley. So compounded things. And we had been working at this for 13 years by then. And we realized, as a community, although we had foresaw what was coming, as a community, we're not quite ready to respond to these events when they happen. So after the wildfire, we started brainstorming. We realized that, probably the next thing, we tend to be foreseeing what's coming. The next thing that we believe is going to be important in our communities is to begin to create resiliency centers. So it's like resiliency centers are areas that are prepared for the community, locations, like we have a lot of community halls in the Kootenays. So the community halls are perfect places for these things to pop up. And what is a resiliency center from our perspective is it's a location where in case of emergency, people can assemble around, but it's also a place where people have prepared ahead of time to know that it exists. There's been education, there's been events, there's been a bunch of different things centered around. So we spend the last couple of years we came into agreement with in the Slocan Valley. There's a hall that's called the Appledale Hall. So we met with the board of directors there. We came in agreement with them. And then for the last couple of years, we were preparing the Appledale Hall to become a resiliency center, first one in Slocan Valley. And we are essentially there. We're opening. So I was invited by Laura to come speak here today about the resiliency center that we're opening. And you know, what is the resiliency? What was the challenges, and what were the things we're hoping to do with that resiliency center? You know, the main challenge was really to find funding and figure out ways that we could upgrade the hall to really be able to withstand challenges like air exchange in the hall, having an alternate source of electricity in case the electricity goes down, having good communication on site in case we have communication issues. So we've gone through that process the last couple of years, and I was successful. And now that the hall is there and ready for a resiliency, if ever there is another wildfire, hoping it won't happen, most likely it will. So if ever there is a wildfire situation that happens again, we have a hall that's prepared for it, and people can know that it's there and they know it exists, and they can come to the hall and have their basic needs met. But it can also be a center for communication, what's happening, what's the latest news, when people can go back to their homes. All these kinds of information can be there, but what can we do between now and that next event? And that's really what the Resiliency Center is all about. So what are the types of preparedness that we can do collectively that helps us prepare for the next time that we need, that we're in a state of emergency? And this goes from environmental preparedness to social preparedness to you know, even personal and psychological preparedness. What are the types of things that we can do in you know, what kind of information can be shared with people? What kind of speakers can we bring to the hall for talking about preparedness? How can we work on building fans like Chris just talked about collectively and be ready for those types of things? So our sense is that resiliency centers are going to become more and more a thing in the future in our communities. I think all communities will need them. And I think that, you know, we hope to create a template that's scalable and replicable in other communities. And we're just starting. We just sent our press release today that the Resiliency Center is opening. So you'll be hearing about that in the next few weeks. And then we are working on a lineup of speakers for you know, the summer and the fall, for people to come and hear about different ways to prepare. And we hope that it will become a place for the community to get to know each other. We've become more of a bedroom community to Nelson. You know, I've been here since the 90s, and in the 90s, you lived in the valley. It was really a community. Most of the people lived in the valley. Now a lot of people go to Nelson, don't necessarily know their neighbors. So when there is an emergency, the knowing of your neighbor is not necessarily present. So having a place where people come and talk about, you know, ways they can prepare and get to know their neighbor and realize who the neighbors are. So that's like what we call the social resiliency. You know, in terms of environmental resiliency, it might be things like providing sprinklers for roofs, you know, during wildfire events. It might be helping people to find resources like a regional district for, you know, assessment of their homes and the work that they can do. We're also working with some of the villages in the Slocan Valley to do, you know, preparedness in their own villages. So how can we spread what we've learned in the villages to the local community? In terms of physical and psychological preparedness, the physical is more like, are you ready? Do you have a kit? Do you have the information that you need? The psychological is more like pre and post. There's a lot of trauma associated with these types of events. And sometimes it takes a long time for the community to recover from this trauma. So how can we come together and talk about, you know, the challenges, the things that were difficult, the things that we hope we'll do better next time, how we can support each other. So those are all the different layers of resiliency that we hope to bring into the Resiliency Center. So this is just a quick note into the field as that we're doing this in the Valley, and hopefully what we do can help other communities be inspired and do the same in their own community. Thank you. I catched up a few minutes for you there, Stephen.
Oh yeah. I was going to say the idea of the resilience centers and what you're doing in Slocan is amazing. And I certainly would hope that it would spread on. And it goes right back to what Jon was talking about, knowing your neighbors and helping, assessing who's in need and what the assets are. Like, it just, so perfect that you guys are doing that. So thank you. And for any of those kind of events that you're doing and speakers and stuff, let us know and we'll put them up on our site, and if and when we do our next over summertime our newsletters, we can try to add them in there too.
I'm assuming, Laura, you'll put the link to the Resiliency, SIFCo.ca/resiliency if people want to learn more about it.
Yeah, she's put it in the chat already.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Stephan. That was great. Our final speaker is Garrett. Let me just pull over his little bio here. Garrett is the RDCK Fire Smart Program Coordinator, and he's worked with structure protection, structural firefighting, as well as 8 years as a wildland firefighter prior to working with the RDCK. Welcome, Garrett, and you have the floor.
Thank you. I'll just hop into it here and share the screen. Awesome. So I don't have a ton of time today, but what I'm hoping to get across is a brief look at some of the other disasters from wildland fires we've seen over the past 10, 15 years, and some of the findings that have come out to that, and how they just really drive home why Fire Smart and what we're doing on our homes, and specifically within 30 meters of our homes, is so incredibly important. And then I'll just touch on the different programs we offer with the RDCK Fire Smart program. So this photo is from the 2011 Slave Lake wildfire, and in the top right corner there, that wildland urban interface disaster sequence is commonly accepted as the same sequence all of these wildfires follow, time over time, all across North America. So what we see is extreme fuels from weather and topography that turn into extreme burning conditions with extreme growth rates that are unmanageable. And then that wildfire interacts with our highly ignitable homes, and we see numerous ignitions in the 10s, 20s, 100s all at once. Because of that, firefighting resources get quickly overwhelmed, and their effectiveness is reduced or non-existent. So we see embers as the leading cause of wildfires on homes, and there's hundreds of spot fires, so these firefighting resources can't keep up with all these ignitions, resulting in numerous homes destroyed. So when we look at this, what can we realistically control on a large scale? We can do some stuff with extreme fuels. SIFCo is doing a lot of good work in the valley with that in terms of landscape level fuel reduction. However, it's not reasonable to expect the entire RDCK and all of the Kootenays to have a landscape level around all of the wildland urban interface. There's so much interface around here, and they're costly and difficult to keep up with in terms of maintenance. So that leaves us with highly ignitable homes. So that is something that we can over time control on a large scale, and hopefully reduce those numerous ignitions. So this is a quick summary of Dr. Jack Cohen's key findings from the 2021 Lytton wildfire, and I'll just run through them, and they drive home a lot of these points I'm trying to make. So number one, embers were key in fire spread rate. It is unrealistic to expect a successful initial attack response, because within 1 hour, 20 structures were quickly involved. So this was just a grass fire that started. This wasn't even in the forest. It moved from the grass to the community itself. Numerous structures involved right away. And this many spot fires on structures would have overwhelmed any reasonable expectations of structure departments in the area or BC Wildfire. Even big municipal departments like Vancouver, Calgary, they can deal with maybe 3 structure fires at once, never mind 20 in Lytton. So number 5, urban interface fire disasters are a structure ignition problem. We're never going to be able to fully exclude wildfire from the landscape, nor will we be able to put every wildfire out. So that leaves us with this highly ignitable homes piece, as I said before. Fire spread was principally determined by the highly vulnerable ignition conditions within the individual's home ignition zones. So that's most importantly the home itself, and then everything within 30 meters of the home. Non-combustible building materials are effective in preventing structure-to-structure fire spread. And big one here is for individual structures and communities, ignition resistance is the most effective approach for reducing disasters from wildfire. So that's why we focus so much on this Fire Smart program, the residential Fire Smart program. And some of the things we offer to help educate residents and help them actually make these mitigations to Fire Smart their own homes. So we offer home assessments via the Home Partner Program. So we have 7 trained wildfire mitigation specialists that go out and do Fire Smart home assessments. So this is like a 1 to 2 hour visit on site. They'll walk around the outside of the home and property you, detailing absolutely everything on the outside of your home. So we look at every little building component and then move out from there. You get a detailed report after, so it's about 15 to 20 pages, providing details on how you can Fire Smart that vulnerable feature. They are non-mandatory, so it's free and it's just educational. So you can do nothing that we recommend, you can do everything, or you can just pick and choose what you'd like to do. And the reports are completely confidential. They are stored on a secure server and nobody else can access them other than yourself and the assessor. So rebates. So after you get a Fire Smart home assessment, you're eligible to start working towards mitigation actions. This year, rebates are available between $500 to $5,000. So that postcard on the right, that number's from last year, but rebates have continued to go up year over year. So it's a really amazing program in the sense that you can get an assessment, find out what you need, what needs to be done for free, and then you can start doing the work yourself, or you can pay somebody to do the work and then apply for a rebate. And those hours sort of roll over year. You can do the work yourself at $32 per hour. Lots more details on our website. Or you can buy things like decking or metal siding, things like that. That's all eligible towards the rebate. The last big program we offer, we do lots of little other things, but the big one be neighborhood recognition programs as well. So what this is, it's a grassroots level neighborhood run initiative. So we help facilitate and support the neighborhood, but really it's the neighborhood looking at what they want to do and making that happen with our support. So we'll go in and do a neighborhood assessment, looking at vulnerabilities on the neighborhood as a whole, and then we'll help organize events and whatnot, but really it involves the neighborhood making a plan and then holding some sort of event throughout the year, whether that be educational or fuel managing a small piece of that or working towards emergency preparedness, something like that. You're just going to record your hours and then you can become a Fire Smart recognized neighborhood through Fire Smart Canada. We just help support that. So we currently have 27 recognized neighborhoods and many more on the way. We also, unique to the RDCK, we offer up to $3,000 in RDCK grants per neighborhood. So you can apply at the end of the season for that grant. And based on strength of application, we sort of divvy up those funds to help neighborhoods build towards a successful the following year. A neighborhood's typically around 5 to 50 homes. We found works the best to keep it on a small scale so we have more involvement and it's not a really big neighborhood. So that's in a nutshell what we offer. I'd be happy to chat with any of you guys and answer any questions once we get in the Q&A section.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Garrett. I love how these several of these things all interconnect, obviously. And the whole idea of getting my neighborhood, I never thought of that. I've had my own personal house going through this Fire Smart program, but the actual neighborhood, like that would be, I'm going to bring that up with my neighbors. That's cool. So we do have some time, to 10 minutes for some Q&A. So feel free to put it in the chat or raise your hand. There was one question already, and this probably for Jon, but maybe not. Typically, how long between hearing that there's an evacuation and the need to be out and gone? Any general length of time there? No, I guess Jon doesn't look like has Jon left the building. Does anyone else know?
They can be very, very fast, depending on the rate of spread and the where the fire is in relationship to the neighborhood that's being challenged. Sometimes it's an hour.
Like that Lytton example would have been really quick, right?
So if you're not prepared, sometimes you hear a knock at the door and someone tells you it's time to evacuate right now, so you don't have time to respond. So that's why pre-preparedness is so important.
Yeah. Garrett, Garrett, are you speaking, Garrett? I'm not hearing you, but it looks like your mouth is maybe moving. Okay, we're not hearing you, but oh well. Phil, I see you had your hand up.
Yeah, for people who don't have cars, need to evacuate. Now, okay, so you might be trying to get some friends to help you evacuate, but in some cases the cars may be broken, or they may not be able to drive, or something of this sort. So what I find it a bit worrisome is there's no list of people needing rides to evacuate being taken by the city of Nelson or by RDCK. It would seem that this should be done ahead of time to know who actually needs to get a ride, to be contacted in case there is a need for evacuation.
Yes, totally. And that's exactly what Jon was talking about, having neighborhoods come together and see who's needing help. And on that note, another question that has come up was around the homeless and the house, or the homeless. How Garrett, Stephan, any thoughts on how, whether it's people without cars or the unhoused, is there lists? Is there any kind of coordinated effort? Oh, Leslie has her hand up to answer, maybe.
I'm just going to add really briefly that I have asked that question before around the council table, and I was referred to Interior Health as being the organization and some of the social service agencies who work with certain disadvantaged groups will have lists of who needs to be transported. It certainly doesn't cover someone like Phil, who is like me as well. I don't own a vehicle, but fortunately there's a car in front of my house, and I'm signed up as one of the designated people for the car share, which is another, program that we offer to have an evacuation list utilizing our cars. But yeah, I have been referred to Interior Health when I've asked that question.
Oh, great. Thanks, Leslie. And while you're, you know what, Leslie, you might as well, you had a question in the chat. Why don't you just ask it?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the RDCK program applies to the municipalities, the neighborhood fire smarting. Does it apply to municipalities in the RDCK, or just is that the responsibility of the municipalities? That's a question that had never been clear on.
I think that's a good one for Garrett to take, but I'm not sure if he's muted.
He seems to be having a little bit of audio problems. He was having this earlier. It was working. Maybe you can put a reply in the chat box, Garrett, and that'd be nice.
I can say that in the Slocan Valley, SIFCo is working with the municipalities of the Slocan Valley. So the municipalities of the Slocan Valleys is, if you want to apply for a grant through the Fire Smart program, then it's through SIFCo. Garrett is working with, all the areas of the RDCK, but also he's also working, I think, with some municipalities. Maybe you can nod, Garrett, if that's true. He's working with Caslow, and he's working with the Cusp and Salmo, and I think he's working with a bunch of them also. So it's both municipalities and regional district combined for the Fire Smart program in selected municipalities. I guess that's would be how you do it. In selected municipalities within the RDCK, the RDCK is also handling the municipality.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Oh,
Let me see. Does anyone have anything else? I'll say it on that. Chris, did you want to
I just
add?
want to share one thought from over in East Kootenays. We did have a block party in our neighborhood, and the regional district did provide their Fire Smart people to attend and offered some of the services that they offer within the city of Kimberley. So maybe I'm not sure if that's the same as in the central Kootenay, but anyway, it is an opportunity if you do have a block party to get to know your neighbors, but also to create a focal point of the party to have some guests like from the Fire Smart program.
Yeah, I can
Good.
reach out to the Fire
Good
Smart.
idea.
Thought while I was on the line, I'd ask the question.
Yeah, that's great.
So
I
not a
see,
problem.
Libby, you were waving your hand. Do you have a question you want to ask once you unmute there?
Yeah, there. No, am I muted?
No, you're good. We can hear you.
Oh, okay. It's a slightly different question, but in our area, there's been logging where they log the place and then they replant, but then they're not required to thin. And so if there is logging near communities, is there any way the RDCK can, I don't know, put some pressure on forestry to put that into practice? Because at least around us, it's created huge, thick stands. I mean, not even stands, they're just like weeds of Douglas fir and very flammable all at once. And so we were just wondering if there was anything the RDCK could do about that, like putting some pressure on forestry to change the rules around that. I mean, they have to have a certain amount of stem stocking, but if it gets overstocked, then it's nobody's issue, it seems.
Stephan, I know you're not with the RDCK, but you're the one that microphone is working right now. Do you have any knowledge of that?
Yeah, I think once there is responsibility for tenure holders to bring a stand to what's called fully stocked, and then post that moment, there is currently no legislation for maintenance of the stand beyond free to grow, which you have a stock amount of trees that have reached a certain age, and then you've met your free to grow obligations, and then after that there is no requirements. So yeah, it would be something that would be like asking for new legislation for tenure holders to do that. Definitely a good idea as we move towards more and more wildfires, that we consider these kinds of legislative changes, but currently it's not in place.
All right. Thank you, Stephan. And thank you, Libby, for asking the question. One other topic that had come up, it didn't come up today, but it came up prior to this while we were in discussions of this. And there's, I don't know who's best to answer this either, but it's just a question out there to whoever can try to talk about it. During wildfires and other emergencies, there is a lot of disinformation that gets put out. And just around how do we stop that, or what are ways to make sure that all the messages that are going out are actual, true, and real, so that we properly know how to deal with the emergency situation at hand. Stephan, with the Resilience Centre, Resiliency Centers, are there things there that you guys can be doing in your neck of the woods to try to stem the misinformation? Or
Not sure exactly what you're referring to with the misinformation in terms of the.
Like often people will be posting on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Like they'll hear, oh no, I heard that we have to
Yeah.
evacuate or we don't, or that, that the fire is on this side, go down this highway. And, just those kind of logistical things are often not necessarily intentionally wrong, but just people are sharing other things that they heard, but they aren't actually the thing.
It's actually it's a really, really good question, and it's quite challenging because it happens both ways. The centralized communication systems often are remote. They're like, for example, the regional district is based in Nelson, and if there's a fire in Nakusp, the fire in Nakusp is quite far from the central, repository of information, and people on the ground often are able to see out their window and see the fire discussed over the mountain over here, and that's live and it's happening, and it's not something that I think Garrett mentioned how large the RDCK is, the size of a small country. It's not something the RDCK has the capacity or the resources availability to be stationed everywhere. So there's a bit of both. So that's why we think that resiliency centers are very important. So there could be a bit of both, where you have centralized commands, but you also have decentralized information sharing that actually is based on communication and also on live activities. And I think that that's probably where we need to head, is because the size of the RDCK is so big. We need to have more and more communities that are ready and capable of responding when there is an emergency, because it could be that one year we have emergencies in all of the areas at the same time, and we would quite quickly overrun our capacity. So the decentralized community organizing is so important, so that we're able to respond as communities. And simultaneously, we need to have chains of communications that are clear, so that whatever is being passed on, and if people know that the information coming out of the Resiliency Center is actually a centralized local, which is decentralized communication posts, then I think that you hit in all ways, and that's kind of where we need to go as these things mount from year to year to year.
Yeah, excellent insight. Well, that's the top of the hour. Laura, I just noticed that you had your hand up at one point. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? No? All right. Well, I really want to thank our guests for all coming and sharing. Also want to thank all the people who are participating and watching today. I do hope that we have a clear and cool summer for all of us, but it is really nice to know that there are people out there working on working on emergency preparedness and being able to effectively, tackle it when it does. There's that one chart that John showed that had the little the amount of time or resources and stuff, that effort that goes into right when an emergency happens. So I do feel a bit safe and secure that we have people, professionals working on these things. But yes, stay safe, get to know your neighbors, give everyone rides. We will be sending out the resources once we get this recording ready to send. And we will be back in the fall with more webinars. And thank you for the suggestion in the chat about a webinar. Yeah, have a good summer and see you later. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.